Welcome. Today on the podcast, we have Ashlynn Doljac. She's an artist, a poet. She graduated from the Ontario College of Arts and Design, and she's an art teacher, a workshop facilitator, and an animal rights activist. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's an honor.
Let's talk about the early years. What first sparked your passion for animal rights and veganism?
Yeah, I would say growing up, I was always somebody who just had a natural affinity for nature and animals, and so always felt really close to that side. And as I got older, I think just a lot of influences around me were suggesting um, vegetarianism and kind of this lean towards not consuming or using animals. So during my teenage years, I kind of started to question whether or not it was really necessary to be using animals for food, fashion, entertainment, and kind of did my own research in a way.
And when you first started to become more active that way, what was your family's and friends' reaction?
Yeah, I would say I was met with extreme support and compassion from my family and friends. Yeah, single-handedly, I can't express how much I was just kind of supported every step of the way.
Can you tell me a little bit about your animal rights activism? What kind of things do you do?
Yeah, so currently I am a safety marshal with Toronto Pig Save, which is a small chapter in a kind of global movement. It's called Animal Save, and so different little groups within the larger whole, and um, essentially during vigils, which is when activists are bearing witness to the animals in the slaughter trucks. So my role is to kind of make sure activists are safe in that regard. As well, I help with the social media pages. So just promoting, getting the word out there and showing people what's really happening.
What kinds of things does a safety marshal do?
Yeah, essentially, when activists are bearing witness with these trucks, the trucks are huge, and the nature of it's quite like dangerous. So it's important that there are certain protocols in place so activists aren't reaching into the trucks and interfering with it, because bearing witness sometimes means being in a on a median, which is like in traffic essentially, and so making sure that they aren't kind of interfering that way or putting themselves in danger.
Hmm. And what kinds of things are you doing while you're there?
Yeah, so most of the time people want to get footage, and because this is the kind of thing that they don't show you in the commercial. They will market like a happy, smiling farm animal, but they won't show you the inside of the truck where there are animals just confined into these tight corridors, and they're covered in their own fecal matter. They're often vomiting and in just horrid conditions. They're trembling, they're scared, and so people are gathering footage, as well as just bearing witness, being present with them. Sometimes you'll hear activists singing to the animals or whispering things like, "I love you, I see you." And there's nothing we can do to prevent them from their ultimatum once they turn the corner. But if we can just offer them that moment of compassion at a red light, that's kind of the aim.
And so what is the purpose then of recording it? Is it, I guess, to share on social media or?
Yeah, I think it's one thing to see it for yourself, but to go home and have that video, it kind of captures that moment in time, or in this case, their last moments in time. Because when we go home after a vigil, these animals are probably already mutilated to pieces. They're not beings anymore. They've been like discarded and disposed by this industry that only cares about making profit off of them.
So that's all part of your animal rights advocacy. What does animal rights mean to you?
Yeah. Every time I guess get that question, I just think back to the first sign that I ever held, and it said animal rights, not wrongs. Because I think what we're doing to animals, it's wrong. We can try and cover it up with labels and marketing showing these happy, cage-free animals living their best lives, but that's not the reality. No animal wants to die.
What would your strongest arguments, ethical arguments, be for veganism?
I would say it reminds me of this quote that there is a rat, is a pig, is a dog, is a boy. And so essentially there's this common humanity within us. And it doesn't matter if you are big or small, if you can speak English or not at all, if you breathe underwater or you live on the land, we are all conscious creatures. We have sentience. And with that, we have the choice to choose. Do we want to live a life that is in alignment with being kind and compassionate to all creatures, or do we want to support systems of violence?
Do you draw the line anywhere? I mean, between animals and insects, say, or something, anything like that?
So there's this term called speciesism, where people discriminate based on a species, and veganism seeks to exclude, as far as practicably possible, harm to beings. So it doesn't matter if it is a fish or a bird or a pig. Seeing that consciousness and that care for all beings, it doesn't limit itself to a certain like phenotype or a way that something looks on the outside.
Well, reminds me of there's a religious group called the Jains, and the Jains, some Jains will actually cover their faces with a cloth so that they won't accidentally breathe in insects because they don't want to do any harm, I guess, to the insects. Or they'll carry like a little broom with them and just sweep the path in front of them gently so they don't accidentally step on a bug. But I suppose everybody, who's in the field of animal rights activism would have different kind of levels of engagement with that practice.
Yeah, I'm learning that it is an ongoing learning curve. Of course, you have the basic kind of ideology that vegans will not consume meat, dairy, eggs. You won't find vegans at the zoo or marine land, or kind of paying for these kinds of animal exploitation. But there's also like nuances and more to it. Even I'm learning about like animal testing and various other like avenues that animals are used as like a means to an end instead of beings that are autonomous.
What would your perspective be on like the use of animals and for scientific endeavors?
That's a really good question. I would say I just go back to that common kind of phrase or quote that animals are here with us, not for us. And so using them for like an exploitive reason that's going to benefit humans, it's still using them. And there's a really fine line between like use and abuse, and to what extent do we give them their own autonomy or the choice? Because putting a dog in a cage and subjecting it to all these cruel tests, whilst there's another dog at home on someone's couch, that's not alignment. That's not care to all. That's picking and choosing.
How do you respond to objections like eating meat is natural? Humans are omnivores.
When I hear the word natural, I just think our current agricultural food system is the furthest thing from it, and it's hidden. So I don't think people even know the extent of how intensive these farm factories have become. And even something like when we are bearing witness to pigs, often the first time that they see sunlight is through these slats in the metal truck on their way to slaughter. So that's the first and last time they'll ever see sunlight. That is not natural. It is not natural to be breeding these birds to be like turkeys and chickens to be so large that they can't even stand on their legs, because we've fed them so many hormones and antibiotics to increase their availability in terms of profit and product.
What about the claim that, veganism is too expensive to engage in?
Mhm. I would say, again, veganism is not a diet, it is a lifestyle. And so, eating plant based foods, if you are shopping in a store, whole foods that are plant based, so things like beans, rice, bananas, probably some of the most inexpensive items you will find in a grocery store. Of course, there's two sides to everything. So, if your lifestyle means eating out 3 times a day, then of course it will cost more money, but it's about how you do it, and veganism is about the why.
What about, so you talked about the trucks. There are people who drive these trucks, right? And that's their job. Is there a kind of balance to be drawn between animal rights, concern for animal rights, but also concern for human, I don't know, employment, I guess you could say?
Absolutely. Something that we do at vigils is try to build rapport with the truck drivers, let them know we're not against them. We'll
Mm,
often hold up the peace sign just to indicate to them that we are peaceful activists. We're not trying to disrupt their job. We know that they are doing this probably not by choice. A lot of these workers in slaughterhouses, processing plants, um, slaughterhouse truck drivers, they are doing this for a means to an end. Oftentimes, studies have shown that these people are coming from marginalized communities and they are doing this work not out of choice. They are doing it to put food on the table and
mm,
pay the bills for their families. And I have one activist friend who is kind of leading this project right now, transitioning these workers
mm,
into plant-based kind of food industry jobs because you mentioned a really good point. So we're talking about animal rights, but human rights. No human should have to work an 8-hour shift on a kill floor. Um, the mental health
mm,
effects there are just like staggering.
mm.
Like to be doing something violent all day and then the PTSD that follows and taking that home to your family.
Right. Have you ever encountered any of those workers, maybe while you're bearing witness?
Yeah, some of them will come out like on their lunch breaks and um, you can just tell that they're very triggered by our presence.
Mm,
And yeah, there's been a lot of kind of altercations, but when we are doing activism, it's very important to kind of maintain the peace. So if that means kind of like not engaging further, um, and there's actually an activist in our movement right now, and he's a former CFIA employee. So he was doing the checks inside of slaughterhouses, and he
mm.
is now an activist on the other side of it.
Oh, wow. Wow. So if there are any of those workers listening, what would you say to them?
You don't have to you don't have to be doing this. And there are people, there are organizations. I know PETA has been helping transition workers out of these situations. And there's no judgment. Everyone thinks that vegans are trying to like attack people for maybe not seeing it their way. I think there needs to be a table to be sat at and a conversation to be had because the truth is we want animal rights and human rights at the same time. And um, there's possibility around all of this violence that's been created.
So your orientation towards them is more conciliatory. It's not necessarily, confrontational or like they're the enemy. You see them
Hmm.
as fellow human beings that you're
Hmm.
also trying to reach.
Hmm.
Yeah. What's the biggest mistake you see new activists making when they try to persuade others?
Yeah, I would say kind of what you had just mentioned that hostile, kind
Mm,
of like escalating the argument, trying to project their opinions without really listening. I know, I think a lot of activists have that stage in the beginning where you're angry. You're angry because you've seen the footage, these documentaries, the truth of what's happening to these animals. So it's a normal feeling to be angry, but to know how to engage with others in a way that meets them where they're at rather than tries to kind of trigger them.
and as an artist and a poet, what role can art and poetry play in activism?
Yeah, I would say just like looking historically, art has always served as a way to kind of unify people, whether that's through song, dance, chanting, poetry. And so, at least for me, writing has always been an outlet where I can kind of express feelings and speak in a way about ideas that are passionate to me. And so, using that in my advocacy to speak for the animals and kind of help people understand it in a creative way, I suppose.
And after the podcast, we're going to have Ashley read one of her poems. And so please stay around after the podcast for that. What do you think about incremental movements towards change, things like Meatless Mondays?
Yeah, I would say for the person who might be eating animal products 3 times a day, and it's kind of traditionally just how you've been brought up, there is no judgment. So, of course, reducing that as much as possible, even if you want to start with one meal where you take animals off the plate and substitute with other plant foods, that's certainly a step. And there's resources and supports that can help with that. But definitely to be wary about getting caught up in kind of the marketing gimmicks. So things like cage free and organic, because I've kind of firsthand seen that doesn't matter if the truck is coming from the organic farm or the free range one, they all get funneled into the same slaughterhouse.
Yeah, I mean, corporation is often involved. You think about some of these mass producers of meat products and so on that also have vegan products, you know, or they'll market their product as free range or whatever. What do you think about that kind of corporate relationship to vegan foods?
I mean, any step that a big industry with a lot of power and a lot of kind of establishment, if they are incorporating vegan products into their lines and people are buying them, that is a step in the right direction. Of course, I don't think it would be reasonable to say overnight the world's just going to be vegan. Vegan world, shut down every slaughterhouse. This is incremental and it's going to take time to kind of get there. But I think supporting as much as we can those steps in the right direction.
Do you see a connection between, climate justice, animal rights, and human rights?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say doing the change for the animals at the forefront, because again, like veganism is not the diet, it is the lifestyle. And so it is the right kind of step in terms of our planet. So things like water use and land, to be eating a meat or like omnivorous diet that is using so much water, so much land, so much grain and food to be feeding these animals, to then slaughter them, process them, and then eat them, which is just taking a toll on our land. And then, of course, you have your health as another side of it. So human health. The World Health Organization is now telling us that a plant-based diet is the healthiest option in terms of heart health, in terms of increasing longevity and kind of regulating metabolic health and all of these systems. Some of the longest living demographics of people in the world, it's known as blue zones, and they have just plant-based diets.
Right. Plant-based and very minimal meat. Like, for example, I was thinking of some Japanese in the blue zone. It's mostly plant, but they might have like a little tiny bit of fish here and there. But I guess one of the longest lived groups would be, I think, what are they called? Loma Linda, I think is the name. They're in California. They're actually a Seventh-day Adventist group, but they're vegetarian and they won't eat any meat. But yeah, apparently they have quite long lifespans. Yeah, so it certainly hasn't hurt them at all that way. What do you think about, the distinction between quality of life versus longevity? Because I think, yeah, you can make a great argument that if you go vegan or vegetarian, you could probably extend your lifespan. Is there anything inherently Is there anything in veganism that kind of reduces your quality of life or your health?
I think, what is there to lose from living and letting live?
Mm.
Maybe I urge people to sit with that. I don't think you're taking anything away. You're just swapping out the stuff that's causing harm and killing, and you're boosting your own health. You're supporting the health of this planet. You are standing on the right side of
Hmm.
history from an ethical perspective. So I really don't see that you have anything to lose when it comes to veganism, especially in this day and age. Um, Maybe if we had this conversation like 30 years ago, vegan options would be kind of
Right.
minimal, and you kind of have to really know what you're doing. But nowadays, it is extremely easy. We
Mm.
have information at our fingertips, and there's so many resources.
Mm.
One I'll mention is Challenge 22. It's completely free. Anyone can sign up, and you get unlimited support and mentorship, meal plans and recipes, so people can really be held and supported in that space.
Oh, excellent. Challenge 22. Cool. Okay, so I want to throw a little curveball at you, maybe. What are your thoughts on lab grown meat? So
Mhm.
I guess it hasn't harmed any animal, but it's still actual meat, as far as I'm led to believe.
Yeah. From my understanding, it's made using the cells of animals.
Hmm.
And so, thus, it's not putting demand for breeding, like intensive farming
Mm.
and breeding for animals. And so, it is like a step, I guess, in the right direction.
Mm.
We're not doing the factory farming, but we're moving away from it. So, I see it like as a middle step between heavily eating just animal products and eliminating it. It's
Mm.
kind of that bridge.
Okay.
So if it's going to get people in the right direction of lowering their meat intake, I would just kind of be cautious with it, not to get too wrapped up in the idea of lab grown meat and kind of its long term effects. It is kind of like a newer
Mm.
thing, it sounds like, that has been
Right.
developed.
Very true. Yeah, very true. We don't really understand the long term consequences of eating lab grown meat. Good point. Um, what would you say to somebody who would like to become a vegan, but they don't really know where to start? You mentioned Catch 22. Are
Yeah.
there other resources?
Yeah, I would say absolutely Challenge 22, and as well, at the expense of the internet being so accessible these days, within any community, I have no doubt that you will find groups of people, whether it's a vegan meetup group, if you are someone who really likes to go out to eat, or if you want to get into activism. There are so many kind of ways you can find circles of people. That's kind of what I did on a limb. When I was 18, I went to that vigil for the first time, and I was met with just immense embracing kind of energy from activists of all walks of life. It doesn't matter who you are, what age, how much experience. The animal rights community is become a second family to me.
What was that like, your first event? What kinds of things did you see when you were there?
Yeah. Off the At the beginning, I would say there was a lot of waiting for the trucks to come,
Mm.
and that kind of uncertainty of what was going to happen.
Mhm.
But again, I was met by a couple of more seasoned activists who kind of walked me through what was going to happen, and just kind of meeting them, hearing their backgrounds a bit. And when the truck came, everyone kind of knew what was happening. So essentially, we would walk to where the truck would stop before advancing into the slaughterhouse, and we were given a couple of minutes to bear witness. And this was a truck full of mother cows. And so I don't think you can really prepare yourself for like the experience of it, because these animals, they just know what's coming. They like, the fear and the dread is just like oozing out of the truck, and it's one of those life-changing moments where you can't unsee it, and they'll never be food again. They'll always be those beings like trembling in fear.
I guess before you had gone, you probably had some idea about, what might take place or what might happen. But then when you were actually there and the reality confronts you, was it that much more real?
Absolutely. And especially when you make eye contact, they say eyes are the windows to the soul. I believe it. Once you look into somebody's eyes and like have that moment, even if it's just a few seconds, it lingers and it sticks with you. You go home after the event and you've captured it on film, but you now know that that animal is most likely not here anymore. And just down the street from that cow slaughterhouse called St. Helens in Toronto is the leather tannery. So if you stay long enough, you will see the truck go in with the cows, and a few moments later, another truck will come to take the skins to the tannery. And it's just
Oh, wow.
the system turnaround is just, it's mortifying to have to.
So it sounds like it would be quite emotionally challenging to be an animal rights activist.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people who wouldn't do it, and I don't blame them. I think there's different avenues for activism. I know that some people can do that kind of thing and be able to kind of compartmentalize and do what they need to do. And then there's other people who find other ways to do activism, like comedy, like poetry, like visual art. And so, yeah, there's room, there's space for everybody at the table, essentially, with whatever gifts and strengths you have as a person.
What's something you think the movement could do itself to improve?
I would say listen to each other more and kind of like working together. I've noticed a lot of subgroups within the movement starting to have infighting, um, just about things that are so far from the cause. The cause has and always will be in the animal rights movement, the animals. And I find the infighting to deal more with individuals and egos and kind of these little
Personalities.
exactly clashing and whatnot.
What, if you don't mind me asking, what are some of the conflicts about?
Yeah, I would say a couple of the groups organize themselves differently in terms of safety protocols and procedures. As I had mentioned before with the safety marshals, anytime you go to a safe event, you will see activists wearing vests and adhering to the procedures, whereas other groups might do things a little bit differently, a little bit more on the risky side, so interfering with the trucks and kind of causing havoc in a way, kind of that friction. And so that is definitely a discrepancy.
So the disagreements are over like approaches, basically.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Huh. If there's one thing a non-vegan listener could do this week that would meaningfully help animals, what might it be?
I would say get real with yourself. So really ask yourself if you are saying one thing and doing another. This is cognitive dissonance. So if you love animals, try to extend that circle. So see beyond your dog or your cat. And next time you choose to have something, just remember that we have that as humans. We have that free will to choose. And if a life is on the other side of that choice, to really, really consider if it's worth it, I suppose.
If we could change one story that society tells itself about animals, what could we change?
I would say that we tell society that happy animals are the result of what we eat. And this kind of backwards logic, insinuating that animals are here for us, not with us. In any children's movie, like Charlotte's Web, like recently Wicked in theater, you'll see these subtle animal rights themes. The children want to protect the animals. There is kind of this force that's disrupting that, but ultimately we are here with animals. We are not here to exploit them, use them, abuse them. And I think we can flip that script to be able to see all beings as deserving of life, regardless.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the Sacred Green. I really appreciate hearing from you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
an honor.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope you have a good day.
The title of this poem is The Cage. Oxford Dictionary defines a cage as a structure of metal bars or wire in which animals are kept. Behold, the barren and broken, behind bars, berated with brutality, bruises, and bestiality, a cavern of corruption. Calamitous cruelty furled and fumbling, feeble creatures filled with fear, a terror-inducing travesty, torn out tragedy numb to this nightmare. The wretched walls wrap in coil, worn into barbs of wire, the taut tethers of confinement. Liberation is true alignment, emancipation and a mouthful of freedom. Because I have seen fear-flooded eyes, with tails tucked and trembling, this is not industry. History, our proficiency, its captivity, disguised malignancy, apathetic toxicity, mothers mourning miserably, the cage. An epitome of deranged morality, a callous and grim epidemic. If structures are bound to break, burn these bridges, and let the walls come crumbling down. Cut the chains of complacency and shake the shackles of our system until every soul sees the light of day. And until then, I will rage. We need to turn the page unto a new age. I urge you to stand up, get loud, and riot the cage.